Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 37 of Canada Talks Electric Cars webinar. We've all come to take the gas station experience for granted. Restrooms, snack bars, good lighting, safety, almost always aspects of our experience. With the race to expand fast charging in Canada, some of these considerations have perhaps been neglected or maybe just undervalued. Considering that an EV charging session still takes longer than a gas fill-up, some amenities are even more critical to ensure a good customer experience. Today we hear from Scott Sharabura, VP of Electric Vehicle Charging for Parkland Corporation. Scott brings 25 years of experience in the energy sector and is focused on bringing EV charging solutions to retail and commercial customers. Before I tell you more about Scott and his role at Parkland, I would like to talk briefly about an exciting contest for EV Society members. EV Society members are invited to upload photos of charging stations across Canada through the Charge Hub app. Photos that meet the criteria will be entered into a monthly draw. This is your chance to win up to $500 in charging sessions on a variety of networks. I learned only recently that the Charge Hub app is actually now designed to allow you to begin charging sessions on a variety of charging networks. In addition to the chance to win up to $500 in charging, you can also win a variety of other prizes. To learn more about the contest, please go to the evsociety.ca website and look at the details there. I would be remiss if I didn't mention that Parkland has been a terrific supporter of this initiative. And they always upload the greatest photos of their newly installed chargers to the Charge Hub app. So you might want to even look up Parkland on the Charge Hub app to see what those great locations look like and how the photos were put together. Under Scott's leadership, Parkland has opened 27 DC fast charging stations and will reach 50 locations by the end of the current year. In his previous role as VP Strategy, Scott led the development of an energy transition plan for Parkland, focusing on how Parkland can diversify its business and help its customers to decarbonize, including EV charging, solar energy, and the provision of carbon offsets. Welcome, Scott, and thanks for joining us for today's webinar.
Me as part of the conversation today.
Oh, it's great.
Go ahead.
No, I'm just going to say it's great to have you here.
Fantastic. Can you see my screen?
I can, yeah. And I'm going to get out of the way and let you go at it.
Okay, fantastic. Listen, thank you very much. Good evening to everybody. For those on the West Coast, late afternoon to everybody. I'm coming to you live from Calgary, Alberta, and really excited to talk to you about Parkland's perspective on EV charging, coming from the perspective of an owner and operator of retail fuel sites, gas stations, convenience stores. How are we thinking about the energy transition? How are we thinking about EV charging? So really, really excited to have the opportunity to speak to everybody today. Just a little bit of a background on me. So I have currently live in Calgary, but I've actually had the chance to live pretty much right across the country. Originally born in Quebec, grew up in Montreal, spent my childhood there, then moved to Toronto, still lived in Ontario for about 10 years, went to university in Waterloo, made a detour down to the US for a little bit and then came back up to Calgary. My parents live in Vancouver. I've spent some time out in Nova Scotia, so I have had a chance to see many, many different parts of the country. And so one of the exciting things about this is that EV charging is in different places in different parts of the country. But it's quite exciting to see the transition, as we go through. I currently head our EV charging team at Parkland. If you go 12 months ago, there was no such thing as a vice president of EV charging at Parkland. If you go 18 months ago, there was no such thing as EV charging at all at Parkland. So this is something that is a very new and exciting area for us. And one that we're really excited to be joining the party and getting an opportunity to be working with EV drivers to figure out how best to bring infrastructure out into the marketplace. Before I joined Parkland, I've actually been working on transporting people and their vehicles for coming on 25 years now. Most of my experience has been doing that the old-fashioned way. So I actually started out in refining, most of my career in oil and gas and refining and fuel retail, a little bit in upstream oil and gas. And so it is a good marker, I think, of the energy transition to have new opportunities like this come up. You'll see as we talk about this is that Parkland has actually been serving Canadians on the move for over 50 years at this point. Obviously, powertrains are changing, the modes of transportation are changing, and we need to change with the times as well. That's what I'm excited to talk to you about today. Little bit, sometimes when you come from Calgary, you feel the need to establish a little bit of street cred on EVs. So this is what we currently have in the Sharabura household in terms of EVs. So the one on the left is my wife's vehicle. This is a Tesla Model Y that she has been incredibly excited. My wife is a software developer by training, so she actually loves the technology, the heavy technology element of Tesla. So that's what she's got. I was hoping to bring you a lovely picture of my brand spanking new Audi Q4 e-tron, but unfortunately I won't take delivery of it until the latest they told me was Friday. I placed the order back in July, so it's been 11 months of impatient waiting. And that is coming very, very soon. So the Sharabura household is about to be a two EV household, which is exciting times for us, but it's also giving us a much clearer sense of some of the opportunities and challenges in EV charging. So that's a little bit about me personally. Who is Parkland? I would venture to say that there's a lot of folks in the call here who have never heard of Parkland before. However, there's a lot of people who would have seen evidence of Parkland across the country. So you can see here a few pictures of what some of our retail locations look like. There's no such thing as a Parkland gas station. You'll never find a gas station that is branded Parkland. But many of you in different parts of the country would recognize this, would recognize some of these different photos that you'd see, both in terms of fuel, but also in terms of convenience store and food and other elements, car washes as well. To be able to help Canadians that are on the move. So we are a leading convenience station and fuel retailer. We've got stations coast to coast, so everywhere from the westernmost tip of Vancouver Island all the way through to Newfoundland and all the way up into the territories as well. Nearly 2,600 retail locations that we have across the country. As I mentioned, none of it is Parkland branded, but depending on where you are, you would see our brands all the time. So if you live out in Quebec or Atlantic Canada, you would see Ultramar just about everywhere you go. Similarly in Eastern Ontario as well. If you're in Toronto, Southwestern Ontario, you would see Pioneer. That's our brand as well. We acquired that about 8 or 9 years ago. In Vancouver, those of you who are in Vancouver, we'll be talking a lot about Vancouver and BC today, but we have the Chevron brand. So we did acquire Chevron's assets about 5 or 6 years ago. So all the Chevron gas stations in BC and Alberta would be Parklands as well. We've got a large number of Essos. We recently bought a portion of the Husky network. We have Crevier sites in Quebec as well. We have our historical Fast Gas brand, which is kind of where the company got started back 50 years ago. So we do have quite a range of brands across the country that people are familiar with. A lot of people are Parkland customers, but they'd never know the name of Parkland. Our convenience store brand is on the run, and we have, I think, somewhere in the neighborhood of 500 locations coast to coast around that are on the run branded. And we also recently, as part of our diversification activities, purchased M&M Foods. And you'll see a little bit later in the presentation why we think food is such an important part of the story. Particularly as we're looking at opportunities to serve customers that are going to be at our sites for longer. Food ends up being quite an important part of what we understand EV drivers are looking for. As I mentioned earlier, we've been moving Canadians for over 50 years, right? So we do think that this gives us a little bit to say, a little bit of perspective to bring in terms of what drivers are going to be looking for and how the transition might be playing out. We understand the complexities of what it means to be dealing with the logistics of Canadians that are on the move, right? Yes, EV drivers do have some differences from fuel drivers, but there's a lot of similarities too, and we'll talk a little bit about that today, about how they're the same and how they're different. But just to give you perspective, between our Canadian operations and what we have in the United States and what we have in the Caribbean, we serve 1 million customers every single day, helping to keep them on the move, helping them to get where they're going, get their stuff where it's going. Within Canada, about 80% of Canadians live within a 15-minute drive of one of our stations. So that does give us, I think, a big advantage and be able to reach Canadians as they're making that transition from ICE vehicles over to electric. So that is the story of Parkland overall. What are we doing in EV charging? Those of you who are in Ontario and Quebec wouldn't have seen any of our EV charging installations just yet. Certainly those of you in Atlantic Canada wouldn't have either, but in Western Canada, folks are starting to get familiar with this. So especially if you live in BC, we now have 27 sites. These are all fuel stations that we operate, mostly Chevron locations that we operate, that currently have EV fast charging facilities out there. All of them are 150 kilowatt or greater. We're expanding that up to 50 sites by early 2024. We're hoping to get that done this calendar year, but we're working with utilities constraints in some cases. Our network stretches from Calgary all the way through to Victoria. So we've covered the highways and we've covered a good number of locations in Metro Vancouver as well. We've had a little bit more of a geographically concentrated network, focusing on BC, trying to get the formula right, if you will. Focusing on an area that has the highest EV adoption rate in Canada and one of the highest in North America. So this has been a fantastic way for us to make our first entry into EV fast charging. Doesn't mean that we're going to be restricted to BC by any stretch, but that's certainly where we've chosen to make a start. So one of the things that I mentioned Parkland brings to the table is a little bit of perspective about gas stations, right? And obviously, the first thing that an EV driver would tell you is, well, I don't go to a gas station. Why are you talking to me about this? But I do think it's important to have a little bit of perspective on how has that role evolved over time, and how do we expect that role to evolve over time? Because that is, I think, an important part of the story of how the energy transition is going to play out. Those of you who might, not sure if there's anybody on the call who's old enough to remember gas stations in the 1950s, but if you were like me and a child of the 1980s, you would remember the movie Back to the Future. One of the first things that Marty McFly found when he went into the kind of town square of the town that he was in when he was back in 1955 is he saw a gas station, right? And he saw a gas station, car drove in, bell went off, and 4 or 5 people came out and just started doing everything to service the vehicle. They washed the headlights, they washed the windshield, they put air in the tires. You know, it's like everything there was about making sure that the car could actually stay up and running, right? And this is a little bit of a switch that's happened over time. Is that it used to be back in the early days of gas stations that gas went with other car maintenance services. So the most common attachment that you would have would be a fuel station and a garage bay, right? If you go to gas stations now, you actually don't see that combination too much anymore. It's a little bit different than what it was. But certainly back in the day, this is what gas stations were like. For Parkland, this is one of our first gas stations, right? So Parkland got its start in Red Deer, Alberta, as a relatively small regional network of gas stations. And Fast Gas, as I mentioned earlier, was the brand that we had. And again, so you could see the folks that were working there, when you rolled into a Fast Gas station, it was about taking care of the windshield, taking care of the headlights, taking care of the car. Just about every site had a garage bay attached to it. That was the model back then. It's certainly a lot of things have changed since then. The hairstyles have changed since then. The fashions have changed since then. The cars are a little bit different now. But also the offering has changed a lot since then. So this is what one of our sites looks like today, right? When you roll into a gas station today, there's actually a lot less focus on the car itself. Now, yes, we offer fuel, but a lot of what we do is actually trying to convince people to spend a little bit of that time while they're there, travel that 20 feet to go back into the convenience store. Hopefully we can sell you 4 liters of milk. Hopefully we can sell you some chips or a pop. Hopefully, often there's a restaurant attached so you can have a meal while you're there. It's a lot less about the car today, and it's a lot more about serving the needs of the drivers and serving the needs of their passengers. And I think this is a little bit of the kind of the transition that we would expect to see in the EV world, is that the earliest installations for EV chargers were a lot more focused on, hey, make sure to actually have a plug in place so that I can charge my vehicle. The needs of the driver weren't always top of mind, right? And so this is one of the things that we see And we're thinking a lot about how do we position our sites to make sure that we're taking care not just of the car, not just of your EV, but your needs and your passengers' needs, because we understand that's an incredibly important part, and we know that because we've been doing the exact same thing for fuel customers for a long time. Turns out that EV drivers actually do want to recharge at gas stations. This is a survey that was done by Boston Consulting Group. They did quite an extensive survey of EV drivers. They took a look across North America, across Europe, and across China. What you'll see here is the results for North America. So the two places that were top of the list for adding EV charging infrastructure were gas stations and highway rest areas. That was not the only place, and we'll talk a little bit about that. It is different that not everybody does need to come to a gas station in order to recharge. I'm sure 95% of you are recharging in your driveways as we speak. But this is a very, very important part of the public charging infrastructure, is having gas stations that can actually offer EV charging, right? So we understand, and we've heard this from customers, that actually there's a lot of reasons why people want to come to a gas station. First of all, they're everywhere, right? I mean, gas stations are everywhere. There's 11,000 gas stations in Canada, right? As I mentioned, coast to coast, all the way up into the territories. Highways are littered with gas stations. Cities are littered with gas stations. There's lots of them around, and that actually does have a huge advantage when you're trying to reach EV drivers where they are. They're usually very, very conveniently located, right? They're on major roads, they're on major highways. They're highly visible. One of the things I like to do is when I drive from my house to my office in downtown Calgary, I try to count the number of gas station signs that I see. And I encourage each of you to go through the same thought experiment, or maybe tomorrow morning, try the same thing. How many times is there something blaring at you saying gas is available here? I counted, and it was at least 15 in my drive from my house to downtown Calgary. At least 15 times it was reinforced that yes, if you're running low on fuel, you can come here. Gas stations, we do a fantastic job of advertising that there's gas available, right? Now go through the same thought experiment. If you're driving from where you are to your office, to your workplace, how many times do you see a sign blaring, hey, there's EV charging available here? I'd be impressed if you found a single one, to be honest. Visibility is actually a very, very important thing. Convenience, right? Gas stations are super easy to get in and out of, right? You turn in, you go to where you're going, you turn out. I've had the experience of taking my EV to large shopping mall complexes where there are, quite often you'll see either Tesla superchargers, or you'll see Electrify Canada, you'll see other deployments out there, charge points that are located in relatively large complexes that look great on the map, right? The challenge is when you get there, you drive there, and you have to go through this labyrinth in order to find where the chargers are. I had the misfortune of going to a Tesla supercharger in Calgary on a busy Saturday afternoon, and it was a good 3 or 4 minutes just to be able to get to where the supercharger was, and another 3 or 4 minutes to get back, just because the traffic was backed up, getting in and out of the site. Gas station, very, very easy in and out, right? Which is, I think, a bit of an undersold advantage. But when we're talking about charging times, a lot of people forget about the time to actually get to the charger itself. And the fact that there's so many gas stations out there, they're super easy to get in and out, actually does play an important role in terms of offering people the convenience that they're looking for. Safety is a big deal. And this is something that is actually, I've seen surveys out here. I wasn't able to dig out the specifics here, but I have seen surveys here indicating that safety is actually emerging as one of the top considerations for EV drivers. Not so much amongst early adopters, but now that we're getting into the mass market, a lot more people are interested in safety at site. Particularly older drivers and particularly women drivers. This is a big, big consideration. And gas stations, at least the better ones that are out there, have a significant investment in lighting. They have a significant investment in people on staff. The layout is such that they can actually be seen. There's security cameras on site. There's a lot of different pieces that go into making sure that a gas station environment is safe. And because in an EV, you're not just there for 3 or 4 minutes, you're there for 20, 25, 30 minutes. Safety considerations actually become even more of an issue than they would be for our fuel customers. And then there's amenities, right? Actually being able to go to the bathroom, being able to grab a coffee, being able to grab a snack. These are important things. Obviously, we have a vested interest in trying to sell these things to you, right? And we'd love to be able to accommodate you and meet some of your hunger pangs as you're waiting for your vehicle to recharge. So lots of reasons why gas stations would make sense as places for EV charging. There's a couple different things that we see though, in terms of the customer experience. So people are there for longer. I think that's that's kind of well established. We're also seeing a lot of unfamiliarity with the charging equipment, and this is unfamiliarity not just there's the drivers themselves quite often are unfamiliar. A lot of new EV drivers out there, a lot of folks that they've had an EV, but they've mostly been recharging in their driveways, and so they're having their first or second public charging experience. It's also new for the staff, or our staff that are on site. So we've actually been investing a fair bit in training our staff to make sure they can accommodate questions that are coming up from EV drivers. And then third, the sites themselves actually weren't really designed with EV in mind. There's an awful lot of retrofitting that's happening to make sure that we can put EV charging in locations. Sometimes that works well. Sometimes that's a bit more of a challenge. And we'll talk a little bit about what that looks like. So hopefully you've gotten a bit of a sorry, went back a little bit. Hopefully you got a bit of a sense here of where this is headed, but where Parkland is been focusing our efforts is that we do believe that EV charging is a lot more than just putting a plug in place. Getting the plug in place obviously is important. Getting reliable plugs in place, getting fast charging speeds in place, getting multiple chargers in place so that people can have a reliable charging experience. That's certainly where the focus is, and there's a huge focus on that today. Where we see it evolving over time is a lot more focus on the other elements, the focus on the driver, the focus on the travelers. Once you got the car taken care of, there's lots of other things that we believe are going to make for a distinctive charging experience, and one that's actually going to be a pleasant 20 or 30 minutes out of your day. So things like amenities, things like clean washrooms. I can tell you we're investing in clean washrooms, and I've heard this from other convenience store operators as well. The amount that we're investing in clean washrooms to make sure that you have a good experience would blow your mind, right? This is a super important part of what we're hearing from our customers. Convenience, safety, having a dense network, having digital ways to reach customers, right? These are all very important parts of the charging experience. Existing deployments that are out there, some have done a good job at elements of these, some haven't, right? And I think this is, just to give you a sense of how we're thinking about it, we see a big focus on the elements that are going above and beyond just putting a plug in place. So gas stations, we think, are evolving to a really interesting and new level. And so we've actually spent a lot of time as a company envisioning what the gas station of the future looks like. Right. Sometimes we are retrofitting existing sites. Sometimes we're building sites from new. And so you can see a little bit of the concepts of what this might end up looking like. So having a site that has a fuel offer and an EV offer that are both catering to different types of customers, having a large backcourt, having enough space available to be able to offer all this, having a hot food offer in back, having the drive-through capabilities that we know is quite important to be able to have. Having seating, right? Actually, it's interesting. A lot of our gas stations today don't have a lot of seating because we're not accommodating people for a very long time. One of the things that we do hear from drivers is, hey, they want a chance to sit. They want a chance to get out of their cars. Sometimes if it's a nice day outside, they'd love to have a bench or a picnic table or something like that outside. Sometimes they want to go inside and grab a coffee and not have to go back to their car and drink it in the car, but actually just sit and stretch a little bit before they get back in their vehicle, right? So there's a lot of pieces like that that we're taking a look at as we're designing new sites. So a little bit of a slideshow here of some of the installations. So those of you who are in the Lower Mainland or in BC, you would have seen some of these hopefully already. Those of you who are outside, if you do get a chance to come out to Vancouver, I definitely encourage you to come to our sites and take a look. But this is what we're doing. So a couple things that are in here. So this is a good example. This is our site in Abbotsford. Those of you who don't know Abbotsford, it's about 45 minutes or so east of Vancouver along the Trans-Canada Highway. So this is a site that appeals to both highway drivers and local drivers that are needing a charge. And you can see a little bit in here about what we're thinking in terms of the amenities that we are offering at site here. So we have canopies. People tell us that in Vancouver it rains every now and then, and so the notion of being able to provide some level of a covering to folks as they're getting their charge started is actually quite an important element to be able to see. You can see the lighting that we've invested in here. We have good lighting for our fuel customers. We want to make sure we have the same kind of good lighting for our EV customers that are in place. and you can see the sight lines right into the store. It's, you know, one of the things that has influenced where we put the chargers on a given site is, are the chargers visible from the store? Again, that's another element of safety, because we have people that are in the store that can actually keep an eye out for any issues that might be having, be it personal safety issue, be it any process equipment, any kind of emergency situation that's brewing at site. We actually do have people that can see it, and we do have an emergency stop inside the store that people can press in order to make sure that everybody can stay safe. So there's a lot of elements like that we're baking into the design of our sites. Curbside amenities. This is the kind of thing that if you're an ICE driver, you take for granted, and if you're an EV driver, you're smacking yourself on the forehead saying, why can't I get this, right? Why isn't there a garbage can out here, right? I've got time with my car. I will muck out my car and take out all the bits of food that my kids have left all kind of sprinkled throughout the back seat and things like that. I should be able to do that in an EV, right? I should be able to have a vacuum. Great opportunity. If I'm stuck there for 20 minutes anyway, I might as well clean my car, right? I want a squeegee out there. Every gas pump that's out there has a squeegee there to be able to clean your windshield. Doesn't happen for most EV charging areas. So these are little things like that again, as you know, we know this as people who have been serving the needs of traveling Canadians for a long time. They need this, regardless of whether it's a fuel vehicle or an EV. People are going to need this. Okay. Hot food. So this is a site. This is our site in Delta, BC, just a little bit south of Vancouver. This is a recently revamped Triple O restaurant. So those of you who not from BC, Triple O's is a regional burger, fry, and shake chain. It is sinfully delicious. If you go have an opportunity to have a look. It's funny, I actually had a chance to go travel to Norway and see some of the installations in Norway and chat with some of the charging providers that are there. And one of the things that they mentioned, we talked a little bit about food offers and having opportunities for, you know, coffee or pastries or burgers or things like that. And the guy from the charge point operator said, yeah, driving an EV is a very good way to get fat. Just with all the time that you have and some sinfully delicious treats that are at the ready here, it can end up being a good way to get fat. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to fatten you up a little bit, give you a little bit of a treat. And so you can see we've actually invested a fair bit in our sites to make sure that they're going to be great places to stop. So you can actually plug in your car and charge and grab a meal. Grab a burger and fries and get 20% off as well. So we're running that kind of discount as well. We want you to move inside the store. We want you to be there. We think it's a more comfortable place to be. It's going to make for a more enjoyable stop. Especially we get a lot of traffic at our sites around lunchtime, as you can imagine, and dinner time, because people, they want to kill two birds with one stone, right? They want to be able to charge a vehicle and grab a bite to eat. Yeah. Training of store employees. So this is most EV chargers actually don't have people there. We do. That's one of the advantages of having gas stations offering EV charging, is that we actually do have people that are there, and we're investing a lot of time and a lot of effort into training them. So you can see the examples here of one of the training sessions that we conducted. We did a lot of these training sessions in December and January, so it was a little bit chilly. We had to kind of go back and forth between providing it outside and inside. But this is part of the dedication and part of the commitment that we're making, is so the people at the store can actually help, right? They can actually help start a charge. They can help, they know the kind of the most common things that would prevent a charge from starting. They can do that, right? And that's something that, again, something you take advantage or you take for granted in the fuel world, having a person there to help. In the EV world, there's no reason why you shouldn't have that as well. I talked a little bit before about visibility, actually being able to find the chargers. So this is something, it's funny. This was a little bit of a surprise to us. So we figured that the EV drivers, being more technologically minded, everybody would find us via PlugShare or via other apps on their phone. And it turns out that physical signage actually does attract a lot of people to our sites. And we've seen this. We've talked to people, and they said, "Yeah, I came here because I was driving by and I saw the flags that you actually put out there." We believe it's important for people to be able to easily find the chargers, right? If you're driving down the highway, having a highway sign. We're actually working with the BC Ministry of Transportation to get more of these signs in place. If you're driving past on the road, having a flag there, putting it on the sign, having the canopy as well ends up providing some visibility as well. So it is important to be able to find them and find them easily and make it that much more convenient for folks to be able to pull in and find the charger. Multiple chargers to ease anxiety. So just to be clear, this is a site that is not quite open yet. This is one of our next sites to open. It's scheduled to open on June 28th. We're still waiting for utility hookup. So we're hoping to get this open before the Canada Day long weekend. But this is in Hope, which is one of the major EV charging bottlenecks along BC highways, because that's a place where you drive from Vancouver, you go east to Hope, and then you split out to go to the Cottage, you go up to Kelowna, you go up to Kamloops, multiple different highways emanating from there. So Hope ends up being kind of a natural place to charge. We have a great site there. We have a lot of fuel pumps there. They're super busy during summer weekends. We have a great convenience store. We have a great restaurant, and now we have 12 charging stalls as well that are just waiting to be opened. And so this is one of the things that we've heard over and over again, is that if you have more charging stalls, the odds of, or the impact of one of those stalls being down is that much less. Queues for charging end up being a lot less. So this is where we have the space, and we don't always have the space, but where we have the space, this is going to be quite important for us. Integration into a loyalty platform. So we have a loyalty platform called Journey, and it has 4 million members already across Canada. We actually think this is going to be a lot more important as we go forward. So having the ability to start a charge through the app, having the ability to eventually earn points, earn loyalty points. We can do it for fuel. Why can't we do it for EV charging? We also we've been doing some work on innovative site designs. I'm not going to dwell too much on this because I actually think there was an EV Society episode on this last year, talking with the folks from Electric Autonomy. We were the folks that sponsored that competition. So this was, some of you might recall this. This was the winning design entry from a design competition for the electric charging destination of the future. Really exciting concept. Think about this as a gas station without gas, a really reimagining what a recharging stop might look like. So we're still looking at different designs and different locations for this. We're quite excited about this as a concept, because this is where you get away from trying to retrofit existing fuel sites and actually thinking through, okay, look, if you could design this from the ground up, what might an optimal charging experience look like? So just to wrap things up, there's a lot of things that we're doing to make sure that EV charging is going to be a positive experience at gas stations. And in particular at our gas stations. We do believe that charging is about more than just having a convenient plug in place. Oh, sorry, I went all the way back. You might ask yourselves, well, why aren't we seeing more charging facilities at gas stations? And there's a few different things for that, right? So it is still early days. I mean, EV adoption is still in the middle of taking off. Making sure that we pick the right locations that are going to attract EV drivers is critical, right? We're coming at this not from the perspective of an auto manufacturer that really wants to sell cars, or a utility that is like kind of has a broader business to be thinking of. We need to make sure that charging is going to be a profitable enterprise for us to do that. We believe it can be, but we do need to be quite careful about picking the right sites, right? Things are changing really quickly, right? Vehicles are changing quickly. Batteries are getting bigger. Charging speeds, expectations are getting different. As of a couple of weeks ago, we have some interesting wars shaping up in terms of standards between CCS and NACS. We still offer CHAdeMO as well at our customers. So all you Nissan Leaf drivers out there in BC, we've still got you covered. But this is a complex thing to be working through, and it does change quite frequently. So we have to think carefully about how that's rolling through. Expectations are changing, right? So I would venture to say that a lot of the EV Society members that are here are amongst the early adopters, but we're getting into mass market now. Customer expectations change, right? When you go from early adopter to mass market. So that's an important thing to be taking a look at. Gas stations typically on relatively small lots, right? And so we do need to think about how do we get charging installations in place, but also maintain a safe environment, safe for our employees, safe for EV drivers, safe for fuel drivers as well. So it is a bit of a challenge at a few locations. Getting the right electrical capacity is tricky. Getting permitting is tricky. These are a lot. Across our 50 networks, I like to say we're dealing with something like 45 different jurisdictions, municipal jurisdictions. So just working through the kind of the details around that can be tricky. And for a lot of these municipalities, EV charging is still a relatively new thing. And so we're having to work with them, and in some cases, do a bit of education about how to work our way through the process. So just to give you a sense, this is space actually can be quite limited at a gas station. This is one of our sites in Vancouver, a pretty tight area. And we would love to put EV charging in here, but every place that we've looked at the site here has different problems, right? Everything from there's landscaping regulations. So the places at the bottom of the map here where you see landscaping, trees and bushes and that kind of thing, that's a city requirement to have that, right? We have existing customers, existing food customers, existing convenience store customers, existing fuel customers that we want to make sure that we retain enough space for them as well. We have to accommodate fuel delivery trucks, which is a bit tricky on some of our tighter sites. We have to keep EV charging a certain distance away from fuel pumps. So that does impose some restrictions in terms of where we can put charging facilities at some of our locations. Electrical capacity can be a bit of a constraint. So one of the things that we've done is used integrated battery storage to be able to help get chargers in place faster and keep our costs down and still be able to deliver a strong charging experience in place. So we have partnered with FreeWire. Some of you may be familiar with FreeWire, so that they make these units that are kind of larger than the typical charging unit, but it's got everything in that one box. Including a large battery. So there's a 160 kilowatt hour battery in the bottom half of that unit that you see there. And that does help to ease the strain on the grid, on the electrical grid. And it has helped us to get a lot of charging infrastructure in place a lot more quickly than we otherwise would. We've been able to offer so far up to 150 kilowatt charging, and it'll soon be up to 200 kilowatt with the newest set of units by drawing only 25 kilowatts from the grid. Now, those of you who are in the Lower Mainland in particular, and on Vancouver Island, I saw a couple of comments in the Q&A. There's downside here, right? Which is if you're using battery buffing, sometimes the battery can actually drain entirely. So we're still working to figure out what's the right configuration here. How do we add more capacity? How do we add more battery storage capacity? How do we debottleneck the electricity availability from the grid, in order to find that right balance between getting charging out there relatively quickly, keeping the cost down, but also making sure that you can get a good charge when you can. So we're still working through that, and that's still part of how we are dealing with some of the ups and downs. I would say that it's been really great to get the feedback from consumers. We spent a lot of time talking to consumers at site, just understanding what some of the pain points end up being. We definitely continue to value that feedback as it comes through. One of the things, if we could ask for a little bit of grace from the audience here, gas stations, anything can happen at a gas station. That's kind of the running joke within our team, including good news is medium and heavy duty vehicles are starting to make their way into the fleet in BC. They are also apparently have decided that our charging stations are great places to recharge. So you can see here, this is a Lion electric truck, a Class 6 truck, that decided to show up and charge at our site, which is great, except our sites were not really built to accommodate Class 6 trucks. And so there's a little bit of a challenge in here with the back end of the truck sticking out into the fuel islands. You can see the charging port was not in the place that was super convenient for the truck. So there's some challenges that we're running into. This is part of what we're learning, and this is part of the learning process as we're trying to get more and more chargers out onto our sites. So just to close off here, we do have a survey that we would like to offer out to our members here, to the EV Society members here. We are always looking for feedback. So please do take an opportunity to either click on the survey link here, or you can use the QR code to be able to essentially tell us what you want to see, right? I mean, we're still in early days. There's going to be a lot of building that is still going to happen. We've got an opportunity to continue iterating it and continue to get it right. I can tell you the feedback, we listen to it all the time, and it does make an impact in terms of how we design our sites. So please do take the opportunity to fill out the survey, reach out to us, give us your feedback. If you do respond to the survey, we do have a bit of an enticement here. So we do have some $50 Journey gift cards that can be used at our convenience stores. We do have the convenience stores across the country. So despite the fact that our EV charging isn't there yet, anybody from across the country would actually benefit from having access from having this kind of gift card. So please do fill it out, and really looking forward to hearing your feedback.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Scott. You really painted a great picture and given us a fulsome view of what's involved in setting up a really good charging location. I'm going to introduce Sean Hart. We usually have Jason Arnaud here to deal with Q&A, but Jason's unavailable this month and next, and Sean has kindly agreed to help us out with the Q&A. So Sean, I'll let you take the questions now.
Thanks, Tim, and thank you, Scott. Great presentation. So lots of questions have come in, so we'll start going through the list here. So there's a few questions about payments by kilowatt hour.
Yep.
So is that something that you're looking into, and maybe you can talk a little bit about how you handle your pricing?
Yeah, so currently we're in a free introductory period right now. It is the whole topic of per minute versus per kilowatt hour is still a little bit of a future problem for us. Our intent is to charge by the kilowatt hour and to get our approval to be able to do that as quickly as possible. We think it's a fair method to be charging consumers that you essentially should be paying for the electricity that you take. Right now, it's people who are using per minute charging. If you have a faster charging vehicle, you're making out like a bandit, and if you're a slower charging vehicle, it doesn't feel that good, right? So we do believe that per kilowatt hour pricing is going to end up being the most fair. What we're trying to do is figure out how do we make sure that we actually keep people moving through the chargers. So things like idle fees and that kind of thing, we're still wrestling with what's the right answer there. But it is, our intent would be to transition to per kilowatt hour pricing.
Okay, no, that's great to hear. I'm sure a lot of people be happy to hear that. A couple of questions about just your charging standards. So I think you support CHAdeMO CCS. Any support for Tesla? Any plans to support Tesla? And just a personal question: do you think CHAdeMO is going to go away eventually, or what's your thoughts on that?
So it's funny, if you had asked me that question 2 weeks ago, I might have had a different question about the topic of the Tesla cable versus the CCS cable, et cetera. So on the topic of Tesla cables or NACS cables, we don't have any yet. I think we're still give us a little bit of understanding here. It's only been a couple of weeks since Ford made that announcement. So we do actually host a lot of Tesla customers at our sites. We have a lot of people that have the CCS adapter. And a few hardy souls that still have a CHAdeMO adapter. So we actually do get quite a few Tesla customers, just given the sheer number of Teslas that are on the road. They do make a lot of appearance at our sites, which has been fantastic to see. We do have, every one of our sites right now has one CHAdeMO connector, right? Just to make sure that, because there are, especially in BC and especially on Vancouver Island. I'm not sure what happened on Vancouver Island, but it seems like a huge number of Nissan Leafs on Vancouver Island. So those ports actually do get quite utilized today. I would imagine over time that's going to become less and less of a focus. We haven't made any decision just yet to phase it out. And certainly they are getting used. So I think it's more of a question of how many do we choose to offer at any given site. Okay,
great, thanks. Next question from Eric. He's asking about reliability. So I guess, how do you handle making sure that the chargers are reliable and available?
Yeah, so our approach so far has been to have quite a tight relationship with our charging equipment manufacturer, FreeWire. So they're a relatively newer company. Was quite an interesting and innovative solution in their battery integrated charging. So we actually do have a tight strategic relationship with them, which has been quite helpful. I mean, we've had free flow of information between us and them, being able to troubleshoot issues that are coming through, quality issues that are happening. safety issues that pop up from time to time, that kind of thing. So that's certainly one part of how we're handling that. We also have the advantage of people there at site, that if the chargers aren't working, they go inside and they complain, and we hear about it like that, right? So there's, one thing that happens, quite frankly, at sites that don't have people there, a charging port might not work, and a customer might just go to the next port next door, and you might not even know. Hopefully they're being monitored remotely, but you might not know for some time if the port's not available, or if the charger's not available, or people will just drive off angry, right? So we actually do, like, the fact that we actually have people at site, and folks that are inspecting these things on a daily basis actually does help to spot problems earlier. It doesn't mean we don't have the problems, but it does mean we can spot them and get folks after them as quickly as possible. So we've seen that over time, like just in the few months that we've been in place, we've seen fewer incidents, and the incidents that have happened have been noticed more quickly and addressed more quickly. And we expect that to continue to improve over time.
Okay, great, thanks. Next question is from Mark. He's asking, when do you think that the number of EV chargers will overtake gas pumps? And he also makes the comment that drive or pull through charging would be helpful, I guess, for vehicles with trailers and things like that.
Yeah. So the second question first, drive-through charging, totally agree, that we would love to be able to have that. I think I'd go back to the comment that I made before around space constraints at some of our sites. So we actually did that photo that I showed of Hope, right, where we have the 12 charging stalls that are opening. Our original design had pull-through charging, and we would have only been able to have a much smaller number of stalls there. We would have only been able to have maybe 4 stalls there, just based on the layout. And like, it was a bit of a weird piece of property that we had. So we were able to offer a lot more stalls. What we've actually done at the site is we provided an opportunity, like a place at the site for people to unhitch a trailer if they do want to go in and charge. Like if they've got an F-150 Lightning or a Rivian towing a boat, they can actually drop off the boat. It's not a perfect solution, but it's certainly better than nothing. Where we have availability, yes, pull-through charging would be fantastic to be able to have, and we've been looking at incorporating that into our new designs. But it's a lot easier if you're designing a site from the ground up than it is if you're retrofitting an existing site, right? Unless, sometimes we get lucky that there's a lot of space available at a given site, but usually things are a little bit tight. So I'd expect to see that more frequently at newer sites that end up getting developed, that are built from the ground up to accommodate both fuel and EV drivers.
Right. Okay. Thanks. Next, there was a couple questions about, as opposed to burgers, how about good healthy options as well? Is that something you guys are thinking about?
Yeah. So definitely looking at that. So one of the things that when we bought M&M Foods, one of the things that we were taking a look at there is, how do we start to develop food offers that make sense for the kind of sites that we have? And so we are doing a lot of work around what are some of the menu items that might make sense for us to have available, not frozen, which is kind of the typical, kind of the traditional M&M offering, but actually had to have a hot food offer there, to have other opportunities that would be a bit more of a range, right? And so we'll see. There will be an opportunity to have some healthier options that are available through that program. We'll see what sells. Ultimately, it's we need to offer what customers are demanding. But yeah, there's lots of opportunity to be able to bring that, and that's one of the pieces as we've been thinking about our EV strategy. This is not just an EV strategy; it's an entire retail strategy. Having, the part of our business that runs the convenience stores and the food needs to make sure we're working to make sure that we actually have the available offers and the available space and the seating and the ingredients and that kind of thing, to make sure that's all going to work. So all of that needs to kind of work in tandem to offer a really good experience to consumers. But yeah, so we're definitely looking at it. I've seen some of the menu items, and it's not just burger and fries by any stretch. There's going to be a wider range of options that are available. Can't please everybody, obviously, but certainly we're going to do what we can.
Okay, great, thanks. There's a couple questions in here about payment options. So there's some people would prefer not to pay through like an app, but would like to be able to tap a credit card. Is that something that you guys offer, and what thoughts on that?
Yeah, we haven't finalized that, but what we're aiming to do is to be able to have a credit card tap payment. So just like a contactless piece. That's something that, again, imagine a gas station that couldn't accept a credit card tap. Like it wouldn't exist, right? So it is we definitely hear the same kind of complaint. We feel it ourselves, that it's a royal pain to have to sign up for the 11th app on your phone and create a new account, and oh, by the way, you have to load a bunch of money on the in the account and that kind of thing. So some people will want to pay through Apple Pay and Google Pay and through the app, and some people will want to pay with just a physical credit card. So yeah, our intent is to make sure that we can accommodate all of the above. Especially, again, a little bit different between early adopters and the mass market, right? Early adopters, I think, we're a little bit more willing to put up with limited payment options. I don't think the mass market's going to be willing to put up with that.
Right. Okay, thanks. Next question is about the electrical grid in general, like with the growing demand for EV charging. Are you guys seeing any concerns with the grid at all in supporting that?
So this is the kind of thing that varies a lot jurisdiction to jurisdiction. I think we've been lucky so far that because we're operating in primarily in BC, BC has been thinking about EVs, and BC Hydro has been thinking about EVs for a very, very, very long time. And so this is not a surprise. This is folks know that it's coming. That being said, I mean, this does end up causing challenges with the grid. If only to kind of get new service set up, right? And this is one of the things that, because we've been putting in chargers that do have an integrated battery, it has allowed us to get sites up and running a lot faster than what you might see otherwise. So sites, we've had sites where we've just been able to tap into existing infrastructure, existing electrical capacity. We had one of our sites that was open in less than 3 months from beginning to end, which is for most folks that are developing EV charging offers, that's unheard of, right? Because usually there's a lengthy process to go through the utility. So it is. I do think that it's it'll vary jurisdiction to jurisdiction. Grids will end up being a constraint in certain places. And so we need to think of different ways to be able to work with utilities to make sure that we bring that charging infrastructure to place without overly straining the grid. Right.
Okay, thanks. Next question is just about your plans to move to Ontario and Quebec. Is that coming anytime soon?
The can't announce anything just yet, but certainly, like, in terms of population size, we have sites in those locations. EV adoption, especially in Quebec, is like Quebec's just about as high as BC in terms of EV adoption. So yeah, like we're actively looking. Stay tuned for more news on that front. Right.
Okay. Great, thanks. So someone's asked, I think you talked about this a little bit, but about Parkland being like a destination rather than just a step along the road. Are you looking at kind of expanding any further than what you talked about to make Parkland more of a destination?
Yeah, I think that's a little bit of what I mentioned before around the investments that we're making in our retail network. So getting bigger convenience stores, better convenience stores, getting more food options that are out there. Where we can, building bigger sites, right? So sometimes that's possible with real estate, sometimes that's not. It's quite common for us to actually take an existing site and knock it down and rebuild it to make it bigger and better, because gas stations can get a little bit long in the tooth. A lot of them have a great location, but the building's been up for 40 years, and it's time for a refresh. So I can tell you, we work very closely with our team that is doing that, those kind of raise and rebuild type projects. To make sure that as they're getting rebuilt with both fuel customers and EV customers in mind, right? And sometimes that means a different site layout, sometimes that means different amenities. But there's lots of examples where we're taking a look at that very closely. Again, back to my earlier point that this is not just about getting a plug in place. This is about building a site that is going to be a pleasant place to spend 20 to 30 minutes.
Great, thanks.
Sean, can we maybe do one more question and then we'll start to wrap?
Sure. So I guess the last question here, do you feel there's a role or any need for government programs or funding in helping to convert gas stations to electric? Is there a place for that?
So, well, certainly there's a number of programs that are already in place. So the Zero Emission Vehicle Infrastructure Program through the federal government, we've been recipients of that program. We've been recipients of funding through the province of BC. Those have been very helpful, right? And I think that I think in particular, they do help to accelerate the decision-making process. So it's not that we wouldn't put charging in place, but we might do it sooner than we otherwise would, which is great for the folks that have EVs today. And it does help to incentivize EV adoption. Yeah, so I do think absolutely those programs do help, and we're tapping into them. We're tapping into them wherever we can.
Awesome.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sean. Great job. And Scott, thank you very much. That was, if I sort of thought through your talk today, I think I would have brought some snacks along. For some reason, you left me kind of hungry, but I certainly appreciate that. And I did want to ask. You maybe kind of touched on edges of this question, but you see a pathway to real profitability for DC fast charging startups? I mean, obviously the food element is really critical to that, as perhaps some other amenities that you have up your sleeve, but it must be a little bit challenging, right, to become profitable?
Yeah, I think the key is going back to the point that I made earlier about finding sites that can drive demand, right? So if you put a site up and it only gets a couple of customers a day, it's not going to be profitable. But if you put a site up and it's actually in a good location, where there's a lot of traffic, high EV penetration, people that need to charge, right? So for us, we've been focused on two main segments. There's highway driving, because you can't use your driveway if you're on a longer road trip, and then urban charging, where a lot of people don't have driveways, right? So if you have a lot of people that are like that, the traffic will come, right? And so I do think that there's being selective about where to put charging infrastructure is kind of the key to profitability.
Yeah,
and then tapping into additional revenue sources like food, convenience items, other retailing offerings like that also helps quite a bit.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you very, very much. We really appreciate you coming on and shedding some light on this whole. This is a very important element for EV drivers. I mean, fast charging is so critical, and I think you've really helped us understand some of the challenges really that are involved, and what Parkland is doing in particular to resolve those. And we thank you for coming on.
My pleasure, Tim. Look, it's an exciting time for the industry. A lot of change, and we're trying to figure it out. So we really appreciate the folks that have had a chance to visit our sites, the folks that have provided us feedback. It's incredibly important. We're trying to do the right thing here, and it is. But yeah, it's going to be an exciting 5 or 10 years for everybody.
Absolutely. All right, so next month on Canada Talks Electric Cars, we're really privileged to welcome back world-renowned battery researcher Dr. Jeff Don, a professor at Dalhousie University. Dr. Don will discuss strategies to maintain battery health in your EV, which is pretty darn critical for most of us. And if there's time, if the time allows, he'll also be talking about what we can expect from the up-and-coming sodium-ion battery technology. You'll need to catch this episode live. I strongly urge you to try and do that, because to post the recording of it, we will require certain permissions from the benefactors behind Jeff Don. And so we can't be certain that we'll be able to post that video. So if you want to catch Dr. Don again, please try and make the live broadcast. Remember to mark the date. It's Tuesday, July 4th, always at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So on behalf of the webinar team here at EV Society, I really want to thank you all for joining today's episode and for your continued support of this webinar. From all of us at EVS, and until next time, stay well. This will conclude today's webinar.